In case you don't know, that's from the day before yesterday. And that's earlier.
That looks like a physical chemistry problem to me.
Thank you very much, Mike, for organizing this whole symposium and this event. It's really quite moving for me, for our family, and I got to say it's very nice to be back in the aroma of ketones again. I spent many exciting Saturday mornings here with my dad.
I'm going to run through some of his artwork quickly and talk a little bit about the different ways that he approached his work and his attitude toward it. As you know, he did quite a number of drawings at Yale of the architecture that were converted into posters of Dwight Hall and the Battelle Chapel, the old campus, and they eventually were incorporated into a mural for the Yale bookstore, Barnes & Noble bookstore, around the top, which was something he was very proud of. He's a little in motion version of that mural, showing the different aspects of his work. Yale was his base.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. That's fine. Sterling Chemistry Lab. That's right where we are. Yale was his base and his roots, but his science took him all over the world. And when he traveled with his pen and his sketch pad and created a record of his travels that was really quite wonderful. In the way that other people might travel with a camera, he traveled with his eye and his hand and delighted himself, his friends, colleagues. The first one I just showed you was Commonwealth Ave in Boston. This is a scene of the streets in Bologna. This is Oxford, England. This is looking out, I think, from a hotel room onto the roofs of Florence. This is from the Citadel looking out on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And sometimes we didn't have to wait for him to come back from a trip in order to see his work because he would send it as a postcard. It was a real treat to get a postcard from Dad. This was, he was away for the holidays, and this showed up in my mailbox. This is Happy Holidays from Prague. It's this kind of work that I find particularly moving, the bold brushstroke, the quickness, the assertion. This is, for me, a kind of visual improv that he did on the spot. There's no going back. He just threw himself into this. It's based on a huge amount of study and knowledge that he's able to do this, but I found it very, very affecting. And he doesn't have just one approach. It depends very much where he is. If he's in the Caribbean, on Montserrat, and the colors are bold and it's tropical, it looks like this. This is Granada. But then if he goes to Japan and he's at the Gold Pavilion, all of a sudden he desaturates, uses a very fine line and a much different approach. Similarly here in Copenhagen with a detail. He loved to focus in. His father during the Depression was a sign painter, and he was fascinated by lettering. As many of you probably know who had him, who saw him work at a blackboard, or saw the calligraphy that he did. So he would zero in on little details. This is in London, a bistro that he came across. He would also delight friends and family, and particularly grandchildren, with his creatures. And they often arrived at the summer house that they had in Wellfleet to find lizards, crabs that he would draw from life, a bouquet, a still life. And he brought the same sort of approach to interiors. This is, I think, something he did probably while waiting for my mom in a hotel in Florence. A very quick sketch of a harbor in Barbados, and a lovely rendering of polo horses that he came across. He also moved into the area of cartooning, something that he was quite good at. This is a couple on the beach. You could see the elements of caricature here and the beauty of his gesture. This very, very simple line, quick wash, and so on. He actually did cartoons, as many of you know, while sitting in meetings here in the Chem Lab. I've got a few here to show you. Some of them will look familiar. Some of them, I will tell you, are in residence here today. So I'm not naming any names, but here's a sheet of studies. Here's somebody that may look familiar. Here's somebody who may be sitting in the front row. I don't know who this is, and I have no idea what the chemistry is on the board. It looks like a very active lecture here. I think this must have been when he was chairman for a while. And as somebody was saying earlier, Mike, you were pointing out, he was very concerned with the library here. And I guess things had gotten pretty bad in the library. The students were trashing the place, as far as I can tell. So people were taking books out without checking them out. Some juvenile delinquent had snuck in here and was eating food on the library table. So he had a whole series of posters exhorting people to treat the books more kindly. He also did some political cartooning. Bill Malden, the Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist from the Chicago Sun-Times, was here as a fellow at one of the colleges for a semester, and Dad studied with him, and they became close friends. And this is a cartoon he did in 1975 of Jerry Ford, then president, Abe Bean, then mayor of New York, during the famous period when New York Daily News ran the headline, Ford to New York, drop dead. So anyhow, the Ford is saying to the nurse, not yet, wait until his pulse has stopped. So he was very encouraging to me over the years and a huge help. And every once in a while he would flatter me by asking me my opinion of his watercolors. I was in awe, of his facility, of his vision, regardless of where he was, whether it was in Arizona in the previous slide or here in the Virgin Islands, another Virgin Islands one. Very simple, very powerful. He would also do these close studies when he couldn't get outside of still lifes of fruit, and practiced a kind of precision that informed his other drawings. You can see the color here of these nectarines and the warmth, and to me there's a kind of generosity in this drawing. I don't know whether that reads to other people, but it suffuses his on-site drawings of forests. This one from Vermont. He studied for a while with Wolf Kahn. He had several major influences. John Wilson in Boston when he was young. Bernard Chayet, who was in the art department here and was a close friend and encouraged him in his work. And then Wolf Kahn, with whom he studied in Vermont. And this is from the Vermont period. He got in a little bit of trouble. I don't think it's this painting, but during this period in Johnson, Vermont, he was out. He used to go out early, set his paints up, do a series of watercolors, and all of a sudden he was approached by somebody he didn't know was watching him and said, "When you're finished with that drawing, Red wants it." So my dad said, "Red, who is he and who are you?" And the guy says, "I work for Red. Red owns this farm. He wants that painting." So the years of practice and his facility with a brush came in very handy. He finished the painting that he wanted to do. He did a quick reprise of it. Stopped by the farmhouse on his way out the drive, gave Red the copy, and off he went. He was closest, I think, spiritually maybe too strong, but in terms of the things that called to him, close to the water. And he did a series, many of the water around Wellfleet, the ponds, the marshes, the dunes, and so on. He grew up on Revere Beach, and there was something about being near the ocean that I think he found particularly moving. So these are last few. This is a scene from Gull Pond in Wellfleet, and this is the ocean. They have a quality of awe to them that I think was present in pretty much everything he drew. Thank you.
Hello, it's a real honor to be here, and I think calling me the editorial assistant is a bit of a stretch because I was the assistant to the assistant. Any of you that received manuscripts to review for Tet-Let sort of between 1988 and 91, I typed the mailing envelope. But let me back up a little bit. So I'm here on behalf of Elsevier. I work for Cell Press, and we in the Tetrahedron Group are cousins within the Elsevier family. And I've been asked by my colleagues in Elsevier Chemistry to really emphasize for you how much they appreciated everything that Harry gave to the Tetrahedron family of journals during his long tenure with them. And that all those efforts were incredibly appreciated. And that he was the kind of editor who really made a difference in scientific publishing. And I can give you just one example. So I actually met Harry in the fall of 1988 and wasn't familiar with Tet letters, and looked at the journal and realized that in the table of contents there was a picture, there was a graphical abstract for every paper. And what I only recently learned was that was something that he very much pushed for. And the first graphical abstracts appeared in Tet-Let in 1986, sort of in the middle of the year. It existed in maybe one or two other journals, but this was really sort of the first time that authors were encouraged and then eventually required to provide one that was camera ready, so that when the paper was accepted, it was ready to go. And that's now a widespread feature of journals, of chemistry journals, but also some biology journals too. And I think we've heard a lot today about the way that art and vision sort of informed every aspect of his chemistry, and that's one where chemists that are trained now don't even realize they're being influenced. So that, for contributions like that, he's had a really long-lasting impression. So as I said, I first met Harry in the fall of 1988 because he advertised for a work-study student, and I was a sophomore chemistry major. And I started off and I did a number of things for him. It was kind of show up today for work and let's see what is in store for you. And he would preface it with, your mission, should you choose to accept it. And I have to confess that the first time he said it to me, I didn't get it. And he had to explain it to me. And that was before Tom Cruise reminded us all, where that comes from. And so one of the things I started off doing, he had an enormous collection of samples of molecules that had been made in the lab that he had a catalog of this. He would occasionally send them off to pharmaceutical companies to test. And the catalog hadn't been updated in a while. And so he wanted me to go through and update the catalog and check to see that the samples were in order. The samples were stored in old cigar boxes on the shelves above a desk in the lab. And so that project really wound down when I found that sort of 70% of the white crystalline solids were in fact black oils. And no one was really going to be interested in them. And so eventually I transitioned into a job in the office. And that's really where I got my first taste of what the peer review process is like and how science progresses. And so he would, have a manuscript, and I worked with both Barbara and with Mary Lou, those of you who remember them. And I learned about how, you send out manuscripts and reviewers are asked for their comments, and you have to have a system to this or it can get out of control pretty quickly. And his system was a box of file cards that had all the reviewers' names on them, what they reviewed, if they had any peculiarities, slow, doesn't like that guy, stuff like that. Important to know. And then one of the projects that I took on was sort of bringing that into what was the time, the modern era, developing a computerized system so that you could actually keep track of it without having to do, this. And so I think that at that point, so that's where I started. And I think at that point, trying to push that, what was really a very manual process, into something that could, take advantage of modern technology was another way that he was really trying to keep that journal fast and forward-thinking. And so that was a privilege to work But I also, because I was a chem major, had the privilege of sitting in his lectures. And we heard earlier about how he had, because he was wearing a wireless mic, how he could wander. And we referred to it as Orgo with Phil Donahue. Because he would come and he would sit down next to you and say, "So how's it going today? What do you think of that?" And students knew that it was going to happen, and it was random, and you just kind of took it as part and parcel of it. And so we saw earlier the Margarita lecture, and the one thing that I would leave you with is a memory of another lecture that he did. I don't know how many of you experienced it, but he taught the Grignard reaction. And to help us remember it, he said it to the tune of America the Beautiful. And so it was "Oh Grignard the Beautiful," and I'm not, you don't want me to sing it for you, so I won't. But if you just, any of you that remember it, if you want to hum, start with, "The carbonyl is polarized, the carbon end is plus. The nucleophile will thus attack the carbon nucleus." And it goes on from there. So I couldn't find, I think I still in a box somewhere have a copy of the full text, but, so I guess where I would leave you with is, whether you're a research scientist or whether you're an undergraduate student, there is nothing like learning from someone who has a passion for their topic and a commitment to communicating it in any way possible, whether it's precise chemical reactions on a board, whether it's a great visual example, or whether it's just taking the time to get to know you as a person. And that's what Harry Wasserman was all about.
Dr. Harry Wasserman's contribution to the growth, reputation, and success of the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation was immense, as the following brief history will illustrate. The foundation was established in 1946, and in the early years it was run internally out of the executive offices of the Celanese Corporation of America on Madison Avenue. In 1969, the boards decided that the foundation should be independent from Celanese, and to make that happen, they did three things. One, they appointed Dr. Bill Evers, a retired Celanese executive, as the foundation's first executive director. Some of you old-timers may remember Bill. Second, they secured separate office space for the foundation on Park Avenue. Third, they appointed consultants to evaluate candidates for the Teacher-Scholar program, which was in the process of being unveiled. And Dr. Wasserman was one of those consultants, along with other distinguished chemists such as Dr. Robert Alberti of MIT and Dr. Norman Mactree of the University of Chicago. Based on the recommendations of the consultants, the board approved the first 14 teacher scholars on September the 11th, 1970. So Harry was right there at the launching of what became our flagship program. Since the start of this program, the foundation has made over 800 teacher scholar awards. My association with the foundation began in 1978, so I was privileged to work closely with Harry for almost 35 years. Foundation meetings were never dull. The discussions were always spirited and of great value to the board. In 1988, the foundation's executive director at that time left unexpectedly, and Harry volunteered to become the acting executive director to give the board time to go through the process of selecting a new permanent executive director. As a result, in addition to his duties at Yale, Harry in his new role became a commuter between New Haven and Manhattan. In 1991, Harry joined the board. As a respected member of the chemistry and scientific communities, member of the National Academy of Sciences, and other prestigious organizations, Harry contributed much to the board's deliberations. Above all, Harry had good common sense. It wasn't all work. As many of you know, Harry was a consummate raconteur. For example, on several occasions, he told me about his experiences in World War II, serving as an officer in the Army Air Force in North Africa in the Chemical Corps. Fascinating stuff. His enthusiasm for words was amazing. This faded and almost illegible 3x5 card has been on my bulletin board for years. On it I wrote down, as he spoke, some of his playful play on words. Here is what is on the card. So this last one, I can't explain it, but he went into a fairly long explanation of why that didn't fit the other 5. Maybe somebody, I never figured it out. But it was fun, working with him. In summary, Dr. Harry Wasserman, over an extended period of time, served the foundation well as a consultant, acting executive director, member of the board, and in 2010, when he retired, as an honorary director. We appreciate Harry's outstanding contributions to the foundation and miss him as a chemist, teacher and scholar, colleague and friend. To keep Harry's memory alive, we have one of his magnificent watercolors permanently displayed in our offices. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on behalf of the staff, of many, many staff over the years that worked with Harry here in the chemistry department, in supporting his number of endeavors, including teaching, research, administration, and editorial work. His contagious smile and infectious personality when he walked into the office lit the place up. And he always took the time to ask how they were doing. Sometimes he'd be sitting there talking to a staff member, learning about what was going on with their family, and he was genuine and sincere. His respectful demeanor when he came in to ask for something just caused you to stop what you were doing and take care of what Harry needed next. And I guess that's one of the best lessons anyone could know. Mary Lou, who couldn't be with us today, his longtime editorial assistant, wrote some notes, and one of the ones she said was she learned about Dr. Wasserman, and that's always how she referred to him, about his enthusiasm and tenacity the day he interviewed her, and then later that evening called her to offer her a job, which she accepted. And then she said within the first few days of working here, he cared so deeply about the undergraduates when they took their lecture in room 110, which was notoriously freezing cold. He would go there every day before the lecture, check out the temperature, and that rendered a phone call to physical plant by Mary Lou to get the temperature adjusted, to which she very quickly learned the names of all the people working in physical plant. But his care didn't stop there. He had genuine concern for staff throughout the university. He showed the longtime custodian who cleaned his office for decades, Bessie, how he appreciated her by giving a room adjacent to his office and a small refrigerator so she had a place to take her lunch. Outside of the walls of the department, I just ran into someone the other day as I was over in a building, and it's the woman who does all the cell phone work at Yale. And she said, "Oh, I just moved offices, Joanne, and I can't wait to put this up on my wall." And it was one of Harry's pictures that he had autographed for her. And she said, I think of him all the time. And you'd think, why would this woman who worked in another building even know about Harry? It's because he used to go over to her office when he had a problem with a cell phone. And he probably had received the best service of anyone on this campus for cell phones. Harry always took time for everyone.
And one of the times personally that he took time for me was I was asked to speak at a conference a number of years ago, long before, Microsoft Artwork. And I was speaking on the, life of a business manager in a very active academic department. And I described it, and he drew this for me. And I said, I feel like I run on the treadmill, juggling the balls of my responsibility. Within a day that I asked him to do this, he had this out for me. Well, his artwork wasn't just fun and beautiful. There was the day he called me and said he encountered a stranger in his office. And I said, did you call campus police? And he said, no, I'll do that right now. And so he did. Later that afternoon, I walked by his office and I said, so did campus police come? And he said, yes. I said, did you give a description? He said, well, yes, I did. Next thing I knew, he was sketching and pulled out his watercolors and he held it up and he said, I gave them this. And it was a beautiful, better than a police sketch of the individual, which we were happy that that helped apprehend the individual because we had had a lot of thefts in the department, which were all linked to this guy. It was really a pleasure to work with Harry. Whenever he came in, no matter what the problem was, and I know that I speak for all the staff in the 26 years that I was here in chemistry, to say that everyone would have a fond memory, whether it was talking to him about his grants or what he needed for his lab or for teaching or the editorial work. I know there wouldn't be one person that would say they ever felt burdened by a request from Harry Wasserman. He was truly one of the gentlemen of chemistry, as I like to remember him as. And his artwork adorns my office walls, as it does many people's. And I will say that it really greets me every day. And I think of Harry with a genuine smile and hope that others feel the same way. Thank you again.